I promise I won't make it a full hour. Try to keep it to 25 or 30 minutes. So you guys are here to hear my talk on skipping the low-hanging fruit. Thank you guys so much for being here. I know you guys had other choices, great choices like Cameron's talk, so I'm really grateful that you guys chose to come to mine. So you guys have spent a lot of time working your asses off, I'm sure. If you're anything like me, you worked your ass off in high school, you worked your ass off in college, you worked your ass off in your first job, and maybe even worked your ass off in grad school. How many grad school folks I got out there? Quite a few of you in this room. And then you worked your ass off to get the job that you have now. And did you do all of that working your ass off to solve small problems? How many of you were like, yeah, I want to solve some small problems? How many of you came to this conference thinking, oh, I want to learn how I can solve that little stuff? No, of course not. You spent all that time and invested all that energy so that you could solve the world's big problems. There's a lot of big problems to solve. It seems like every day on the news we hear about new problems. Problems in business, problems in education, problems in public service, problems in healthcare especially. That's the sector I work in. And we all want our work to matter. That's why you guys are here. You're here learning new skills, learning new strategies, meeting new people, so that you can go back to your hometown, go back to your companies, and find out, what can I do to make my work matter more? What can I do to make a bigger impact on my company, on my team, and on the world? And yet, when we find ourselves thinking, I know this problem that we have. We've got a really big problem here, right? We may go into our bosses and we say, it's okay, I got a plan. Okay, there's a big problem, but I have a plan. I know how we're going to fix it. We need to make this big structural change, right? We need to do something very different from what we've been doing now. And oftentimes we go into these conversations with our leaders, this is what they're facing. They think, ooh, great, big problem, you got a plan. But you know what we should do? First, let's focus on the low-hanging fruit. How many of you guys have heard this? Everybody. All right, be honest. How many of you have said it? Everybody, right? We've all said this phrase because it's easy. It's easier to focus on low-hanging fruit. My mission is that after this talk, you'll never say this phrase again, and that when you do hear it being said, you will cringe the way I cringe when I hear it being said. Not just because this phrase is a cliche, although it is, and not just because it's a flawed cliche, although it is, but because it focuses on the mediocre, and it sets our sights on things that are mediocre, just okay, just fine, just good. And the mediocre can very easily be commoditized. So I want to tell you guys a quick story of coffee. Many of you guys have coffee right now. I can see you guys with your little Starbucks cups in your hands and your little sleeves. You can get coffee anywhere, right? And you can get it for almost no money. You can get it in your office. You can get it, when you're at a conference for free, usually. You can get it in your kitchen cupboard. You can get it at your neighbor's house. Pretty much wherever you want to get coffee, you can get coffee, and you can get it for free. So how do we explain, then, the fact that a little company called Starbucks, you may have heard of it, was able, in just a few decades, to open 18,000 stores almost, selling coffee for $4? How do we explain that? I don't know about you guys. My coffee sometimes costs more than $4. I usually get dairy-free, and so you're getting like oat milk, and that's an upcharge, and usually, getting like extra shots, that's an upcharge. Sometimes my coffee costs $8, right? So how do we explain that this company is selling something that you can get for free anywhere else for $8? They did this because they focused on what only they could do. They created these specialty drinks that you could only get at Starbucks. They started using ingredients that were more difficult to get than just coffee grounds. They hired friendly baristas who would get to know you and who would get to know your order and know your name. Then they created this special secret language around coffee and around Starbucks coffee that you would learn, and when you learned it, you'd be in the in group, right? You know how to make a dirty chai, or you know that when you get 4 shots, it's called a quad mocha. So they created this secret language, which is a new experience. And then they also offered things like free Wi-Fi and a place to sit, place that you could work that wasn't at your home or your office, and more. You guys could probably think of some more things that Starbucks provides. Anybody have any other things they want to add? No? Nobody? Okay. And Folgers just can't beat that, right? It doesn't matter if the best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. There's nothing that they can do to beat this experience that Starbucks has created. And certainly, you can't beat that by your office. You can't beat that with your office coffee grounds. Often burnt, not very good options for sugar, things like that, right? So the first reason to avoid the low-hanging fruit is it's just too easy to pick, right? So if you're going to do something to make your content better and actually consumable for the mass market, you've got to do what Starbucks does. You've got to create a unique experience that other people are not willing or able to create. I said earlier that low-hanging fruit is a flawed cliche. That's true, and I want to tell you a little bit of a story. So when we think about picking a low-hanging fruit, what is that image that we get in our brain, right? The image of an apple tree. And so imagine that I've got this beautiful apple tree here. It's full of fruit. It's got fruit on the bottom. That's that low-hanging fruit. It's got fruit at the top. That's high-hanging fruit. And you got fruit in the middle, right? Lots of apples. They're all beautiful and delicious, and there's plenty to pick. And so if I go with the low-hanging fruit principle, right, I've got my ladder. My ladder is capable of getting me to any point in this tree. And I've got my basket that I'm going to start collecting apples and putting the apples into. And so if I say, okay, great, I'm going to start picking all the ones that I can reach from the ground, no problem. Fill up my basket, pick all those apples. And I go over to my ladder because I'm starting to get to a point where I just can't reach them anymore. Even when I'm standing on my tiptoes, can't reach them anymore. So, okay, great. Get on my ladder. I take that first step, pick some more apples. Well, it's a little harder to step up that first step than it would have been if my basket was empty, but not too bad. So I get some more apples from the lower middle part of the tree, and then I take that next step, and I'm starting to really struggle because this basket's getting heavy, right? It's full of apples. So I say, okay, great. My basket's getting too heavy, and now it's kind of full, and I'm really struggling, and my brow is starting to sweat. So I've got to go back down this ladder and put the apples down. I've got to get a new empty basket. So the low-hanging fruit is actually weighing me down. So I've got to get a new basket. Okay, great. Go up to the middle part of the tree. Start from there. Get more apples. Fill it up. Struggle to take those next couple of steps. Fill it up with that fruit from the top of the tree. Come back down. Put my basket down. So that was hard. I had to put a lot of work into that because the whole time I was having to take every apple that I picked, I was having to try to carry it up this tree. You're working against gravity. So what happens if I flip that around? I say, okay, great. Instead of picking the low-hanging fruit first, I'm going to pick the fruit at the top of the tree first. So I take my empty basket and I climb like a breeze to the top of the tree and I start filling up my basket. Great. All right, got a full basket. And it's starting to get heavy, but that's okay because I'm working with gravity. So when I take a step down to the next rung of the ladder, gravity's helping me take it down. So it's like, a little bit of relief as you take that step. And you fill up your basket more, and maybe it gets full toward the middle of the tree, and you're like, I got to take this whole basket down. It's full. But now you're halfway down the tree. So you don't have to go quite so far. So you walk down the tree, you put your basket down, you get the rest of it. And even then, you got your empty basket. You only have to go halfway up the tree. See how much easier this is this second time around, right? So you fill up your basket at the middle of the tree, take a couple steps down. Maybe it's a little heavy, but you're working with gravity again. You fill it up with the low-hanging fruit. You set your basket down. Now, which one of those processes was easier for you, right? It's the second process. You started with that high-hanging fruit. So reason number 2 that we avoid low-hanging fruit is because it slows us down. And I didn't come up with a reason number 3 because you don't need one. Those first 2 reasons are reason enough. And our content is the same, right? when we focus on the low-hanging fruit of our content, it slows us down. So I want to tell you guys a little bit of a story. I was telling some folks earlier, I work at a children's hospital. This is a photo of one of our NICU nurses working with one of our babies. And we have about 4,000 pages on children's.com that are various different types of content. We have content for conditions where we explain about all the different conditions that a child can have. We have content about treatments. So, okay, what are the different labs and tests and treatments that we offer to help kids who have these different conditions, and how do those treatments work? We have information about our locations, information about our providers, so our physicians and our nurses, and we have information about medications, so kind of similar to a treatment, but not exactly. And we have other types of content as well. So obviously, when we're writing this content, we want to make sure that it cannot be commoditized by Google and Amazon. And so what do I mean when I say content being commoditized? If you take a look at this, it may be a little bit of an eye chart, but right here it says asthma. This is a search for asthma on Google. What do you guys notice? Shout it out. Featured snippet, that's right. And what we normally see inside of featured snippets is that it's other people's content. So when somebody says featured snippet, this is what they're talking about. This is a featured snippet called the knowledge graph. And usually, the knowledge graph has other people's content in it. It may be pulled from Wikipedia. It may be pulled from your Google My Business page. But it's usually pointing people to other websites. Healthcare content's different, and it's not just healthcare content, it's lots of other different kinds of content as well, which you'll see here in a moment. And that Google has paid money to license and create healthcare content. So they have decided that healthcare searches happen so frequently that it's worth an investment for them to create their own unique content or purchase their own unique content around healthcare topics. That's what they've done here. So if I want to compete here, I mean, look how much more, first of all, let's talk about how much more engaging this is. You got some blue links, you've got a URL, and you've got relatively shitty meta descriptions. And then over here on the right, which is Google's content, you've got this image, which is very engaging and explanatory. And I can really actually see the airway constricting. I can see the mucus that's keeping someone from breathing. This really helps to illustrate what is going on when somebody is experiencing an asthma attack. It's so much more engaging than this content that's over here on the left, right? And they go into other things. How is it treated? How common is it? All that stuff. They even have added these tabs in recently where you can click in and see symptoms. You can click in and see treatments. They've made this an entire engaging experience to prevent you from clicking here. Why? Because the longer you stay on Google, the more ad revenue they can collect, the more that their shareholders will be impressed, the more investments they will get, right? So if I want to compete for a search like asthma, what do I have to look for? I have to look for the thing that only we can do. And what is our niche? Well, we focus on children. So if you do a search for asthma in children, this doesn't show up. This featured snippet is not there, or the knowledge graph is not there. So we have the opportunity to then rank and actually get that click. Same thing goes for albuterol, right? Albuterol is a treatment for asthma. They do the same exact thing. They have invested in creating these different content types, and you can see how specific they're getting. We're talking about being niche, right? But they're getting pretty niche in some of these cases. You know, albuterol for use during pregnancy, prescription needed, or consult a doctor. Alcohol, no known. I mean, this is pretty niche content, and they're doing quite a bit, but it's for albuterol overall. They're not doing anything for albuterol with children. What are the risks specifically to children? Children are not little adults. So we can say, okay, great, that's our niche. That's what we go after. And you guys have examples of these things too, right? What is the more specific thing that you can go after that is not easily created by Google or by Amazon? Because we just can't compete with Google. You know, earlier you saw Brittany's talk. She talked about all of the money and access and power and brains that they've got sitting over there in Silicon Valley and across the world that are working on making Google better, and they're working on projects like this. You can't compete with that amount of money. But what you can compete with is the fact that you can create things that are not scalable for Google and for Amazon. So another example, asthma in children, this is how it actually shows up. So great, we can compete with this. Albuterol for children, great. No knowledge graph, we can compete with this. We can go after this spot. Niche content is significantly harder to create, and that is the reason that is a win in this case. Niche content requires that you go out and do interviews. It requires that you create first-party research. It requires that you do fact-checking. And all of that whole process takes a lot of time. But it's not scalable for Google. Google's going to do these things that are very scalable, very accessible, very easy to do. They're going to focus on the low-hanging fruit. Niche content, for that reason, is the antidote to being commoditized by Google and Amazon. If it is easy to create, you will lose. You just cannot compete with this type of money, with this type of power that Google and Amazon have. Another example, the folks that used to do time conversions and used to rank number one, man, they're in trouble because Google actually does this now right in the search engine result. This is what people are calling a zero-click search. If you search Eastern time conversion to Central time, it's just going to tell you. It's going to tell you what time it is in the Eastern time if you're in Central and vice versa. So if you are the person, worldtimebuddy.com, who has the number one ranking, it's worthless. Who cares about the number one ranking because you're not going to click on it. Google might as well not even show the results because none of you are going to use it. How many of you guys, if you saw this result, would be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to scroll past these people also ask questions, and I'm going to click on the number one result because I don't know. Maybe Google's got this wrong. Anybody? Nobody's going to do that. So your number one ranking is worthless. Okay, so let's talk about Amazon. What happens if I ask Amazon this question? What happens? Anybody? She's just going to tell you. Right? You have no opportunity to get a second result, right? So if you think that Amazon isn't investing in creating first-party content for answers like this, you're in denial. They, right now, are investing tons of money, just like Google has, in creating answers that is their own content. Why? Because then they don't have to attribute your content. And with Alexa and with Echo, you don't even have the opportunity to see another result. Whatever the first result is, it gets read out. You're like, okay, cool. That's the answer. You don't need to see a second result because you have the answer. So you don't even have an opportunity to be in position 2. You have to own position 1. You have to have the best answer. Otherwise, you're not even going to be considered. Alexa's not going to show you. And if Amazon has an answer for that content, it's going to be Amazon's going to read out. They're not going to say, you know what, I know we've invested all this money in creating this content, but I think I'll read out Courtney's result instead because I think it's better. They're just not going to do that. So what is the thing that can help us to address this problem? Provide precise answers to precise questions, right? So we talked earlier about asthma, but asthma in children is a more precise question. If you can answer that more precise question that Google or Amazon is going to struggle to answer, you're going to put yourself in a better position for your content to rank and for your content to get the engagement from the user. You can also invest in content that is extremely thorough. There's 2 benefits to this. You may find that actually Google, in some cases, does say this content for this particular query actually is better and more thorough than the content we have, and so we're going to rank it. That's great. That's a benefit. You may also find that somebody doesn't actually get the answer that they need from Google's knowledge card or from Amazon's answer. And so then what are they to do? What are they going to do? They're going to say, okay, I need to do some further investigation. I need to look at a different result. I need to ask this question differently. They're going to look for content like yours that is more thorough. And so you're going to be more likely to be immune to that knowledge card or that knowledge graph on the right-hand side because folks are going to be looking for more information. This is particularly true when people are making big decisions. So if you're purchasing a car, or if you are selecting a physician, or you're researching a condition, that's going to be a lot. People are going to be much more likely to look for thorough content than if they're selecting, say, toilet paper or something like that. That's less of an important decision. You should also consider alternative formats that are difficult to scale. So when I say alternative formats, I mean things like podcasts, because lots of people are listening to podcasts right now. In fact, how many of you guys heard that Google is starting to index podcast episodes and show them within the search engine results page, right? So if you have really great audio content, that's really difficult for Google to scale. They're not going to be able to create podcasts and audio content that is going to work well inside of the search engine result. That's an opportunity for you. Videos are the same way. And in fact, videos are even better because videos have the opportunity to rank in YouTube. And YouTube doesn't have this same problem that regular Google results have. There is no knowledge card inside of YouTube. So you have the opportunity actually to own that space and own that content in a place where you're not going to be competed with from Google. And that's a really good opportunity. In addition to that, you can create white papers. This type of content is very thorough. It's downloadable. A lot of times it's more engaging because it's got more images and videos, or not videos, but other downloads and things like that. They're involved with it. Infographics, frequently those are a little bit more engaging. Anything you can do to up the production value, that is going to make it really hard for Google to compete with. And people want to consume this content through different mediums, right? I travel a lot, so any kind of audio is going to be great for me because it's hard to read an article when you're traveling. It's also hard to pick up an article from where you started. So if you left off halfway down, it's hard to start again halfway in. With audio, that's no problem. I just hit play again, right? So people want to consume this content through different mediums. You have to give them to them. And Google and Amazon are heavily reliant on text and image. In fact, Amazon is not really reliant on image at all. They're just overly reliant on text. We think of Echo and we think of Amazon content as being voice. But 9 times out of 10, it's just Echo and Alexa reading text content that they've turned from text to speech. They aren't providing unique audio content. So that's a real opportunity for you guys to say, okay, I'm going to make myself immune to this commoditization by creating content in a different medium. Okay, so let's talk about a couple of other examples. I know, again, this is kind of an eye chart. This search says Tesla Model 3 safety rating. That's pretty niche, actually. And here we have Google saying, okay, I know what the safety rating of a Tesla Model T is. It's 5 stars. Or Model 3. Model T. What, did we go back to 1910? Model 3. Okay, so what do we do in this case? If you were Tesla, or you were a car dealership, or you were somebody who owned a automotive blog and you were trying to create content around the Tesla Model 3 and their safety, what can you do to make yourself more immune to this type of result? Yeah, I would recommend thinking about things like Tesla Model 3 safety rating for car seats, right? These are things people are searching for, things that they're interested in, but they're just hard enough for Google to do at scale and just easy enough for you to create the content that it's the right balance. It gives you the opportunity to get a click that you might not have gotten otherwise, because you're just not going to be able to compete on that regular safety rating search anymore. There was a time when you could. That time is going away. I think Rand Fishkin was quoting it at 50% of searches are zero click these days. So that's a lot. That number used to be next to 0. And now you've got it up near 50%. That's a big change. So marketing conferences is another one. Google has this, it's not the knowledge card, it's a different featured snippet for events that they do. So if I search marketing conferences, they recognize, oh, this is an event that you're searching for. Okay, great, here's some marketing conferences that you've got. And you can't compete with that. It's taking up the whole first page. On mobile, it's going to take up even more real estate than this, right? But what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to create a blog instead, or a page instead that's about marketing conferences for different industries. I'm going to create one for healthcare. I'm going to create marketing conferences for automotive. And you can still list broad conferences like Content Jam on this blog, right? But if you know that there's healthcare speakers, you know that there's automotive speakers, things like that, you can say, okay, this is a good one for folks in the automotive industry to go to. You can create a blog post on that. That's that niche content. You can focus on the low-hanging fruit when you become the next Amazon or Google. Until then, it's better that you just skip it and focus on more niche content that's going to make you immune. Thank you guys so much. Usually here, instead of including a picture of my face, because you guys know what my face looks like, you've been watching me for 25 minutes, now I include a picture of my baby, but they're actually here. My wife and kid joined me today. So, I figured it was better to see her in real life than actually try to see a photo of her. Thank you guys so much for coming. If you guys, I think we have plenty of time for questions. But if you're too shy or you don't have a chance to ask your question, please write down my email or my Twitter or my phone number. This is my real phone number. So if you want to text with a question or schedule a call, I'm happy to talk more about this subject. I also have a podcast called For Folk's Sake. It's not about this topic, but it's about cultivating inclusive communities. We talk about any community from faith and education to business and public service. So if that's something that's interesting to you, I would love if you would subscribe to it, and I'd love your feedback about the content on that. So questions?
Okay, so we're from a healthcare organization. It's an association, actually, and we have a lot of thorough content that I would say we've invested in. However, it's behind a number of firewalls.
Mm-hmm.
So we are not able to get the visibility in Google to get people to come in, and unfortunately, our members don't sign in all that often,
Uh-huh.
which is a problem we're working to fix with our digital member experience. But any tips on how to maximize your thorough content if it might be behind a wall?
Who's your audience?
Dentists.
Dentists. So my guess is that the content that the dentists are buying from you is not, is it written for dentists or is it written for dental patients?
It's written for dentists, mostly about
Fascinating.
management and stuff like that. That's on the small business side of things, sometimes clinical guidelines, stuff like that.
Do you have anything that's not gated?
We have some stuff that's not gated, but it's always a tug of war between the people who are producing it and then us on the content side. We want to get the eyeballs on it. Sometimes we've toyed with lead generation and putting a snippet. For some reason, the behavior, we think it has to do with the experience. Once you're behind the firewall, it's cumbersome and hard to navigate.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to fix that, but people just don't want to take the extra steps
To sign in, yeah. Yeah, you're going to really struggle with it being behind a firewall. I mean, my advice, like my earnest advice, would be do less of it behind a wall and see, does it affect your revenue?
Yeah.
I mean, you could do the Gary Vee model where it's like 90% of it's free and then you only ask people to pay for that 10% that's really highly produced. But that's a tough sell. So, I mean, I won't fault you if your company says no. That answer your question?
Yeah.
Great.
So if I were working on a marketing team and other people don't really know, I mean, I get this, it makes sense, but, I say I want to go and focus on these niche keywords and content and spend a lot of time on very detailed answers. How do you counter people who come back to me and say, you're just focusing on baking from the scraps, you're spending a lot of time on these low value, long tail keywords, and we don't think you're, maybe since they don't really have the same mindset, we don't think you're doing what's most valuable to us. You should be going after the low-hanging fruit and wasting your time.
Yeah, I will say I don't believe that niche content is the scraps. But if you are working with someone who does believe that, I would say, would you rather eat scraps or eat nothing at all? Google is putting you in a position where you will eat nothing, you will go hungry, or you will work on niche content. I would recommend you look for another job. Children's is hiring.
So where would you recommend starting? Because I work for credit unions, exactly the kind of issue or whatever. There's a bazillion articles on how to
Yep.
new versus buy versus lease, that sort of thing. So I go back to the office tomorrow. Where do I start this
Will Reynolds, if you're familiar with him, is going to be the closing keynote today. So I would start with research. And Will is going to show you a way to do the type of research that you need to do to be successful here at scale and to really identify those opportunities. So if you're able to stay until Will's talk, he's going to talk about Power BI. I could try to explain it, but I will not do it justice. He's going to show you how to use a free tool called Power BI to do the research that you need to be successful, and that will really set the foundation for doing this kind of work at scale. Because it's really about making sure that you are aware of. So the first step is to say, okay, where is Google already commoditizing this content? Where do I see them inching toward? And what is the opportunity that's left over from that? How can I take it a step further, be more thorough? How can I create content that they're not going after? So you have to kind of know what's already out there to do that first. And Will's research and talk is really going to show you how to do that. So sorry, I know that's like a half answer. But you'll be here, I'm assuming, when Will's talking. Oh, okay. Well, you'll have to get the video then afterwards. Other questions? Yes. Cool. Same with healthcare. Yeah, I will say don't make assumptions. The belief when I came to Children's was that if you wrote in-depth content for healthcare conditions, that people weren't going to be willing to read it, that it was going to be too long, it was going to be too technical. But if you think about the mindset of someone who's making a big decision, like who's going to treat their child for leukemia, you're going to read just about anything, and you're going to be highly educated, right? Because even if you're not a highly educated person in the average life, you are going to read every single thing about leukemia. You're going to read every single thing you can about childhood leukemia, and you're going to really understand it before you make that decision. So we were making an assumption about the level of interest in technical content for our user than was really true, right? Like they actually are interested in more technical content. Now, can I write it in half Latin words that I would write for a journal for physicians? Of course not. There is a balance there, but we were making an assumption that was not true. So I wonder, is that also true for the customers that you guys have? And the way that we discovered this was actually by talking to the people who work at the front desk, by talking to the people who answer our phones, and by talking to our patients themselves and saying, like, what content do you actually want? Like, what level of content is helpful to you? Again, that's not scalable. Google can't do that. They can't talk to your customer. You can. You have access to them. But we've gotten kind of lazy, right? We like to do research sitting in our computer chair, and you can't do that kind of research sitting in your computer chair. You have to go talk to people. And sometimes you have to talk to the most undervalued people in your organizations. People that work at the front desk and answer your phones. They're undervalued because they have all of this rich information about questions that people are asking, the type of language that they're using. So I would encourage you to just go talk to your customer and find out, like, hey, is this too technical for you? It seems simple, but we almost never do that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Great.
We're developing content, and instead of as a company publishing it under your author's name, it has the name of the employees.
Uh-huh.
Right. And then that employee sometimes wants to take that and also post it on LinkedIn as their article.
Uh-huh.
Is that a good practice to allow, or are there better ways of doing it?
I think it's a good practice. I mean, content distribution is important. What the challenge you run into there is duplicate content. But LinkedIn, I think, offers this, and Medium and many of the other sites offer the ability to point back to the original article. And they actually, I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, they actually put a canonical tag in the code so that Google can see, okay, yes, this is being distributed here, but it actually originally was here, so I'm going to rank this article instead. And you still get all the pass-through from anybody who's linking to that. The link juice, if you will, passes to the original article. So I think it's a great idea because LinkedIn is way more likely to use their algorithm to push and increase the reach of an article that's living on LinkedIn because they don't want to take you off to your website. Now, so the other side of that is I'm assuming that your business doesn't make money off of ads. If you are a business, and many of you may be, where getting people to come to your website and click on affiliate links and buy products, or you get a per impression cost that you're making revenue off of, it might not be a good idea to share that content on LinkedIn because LinkedIn's going to get the ad revenue instead of you. So that's just something to really consider is when you're doing that distribution, what's your end goal? If the end goal is to become a thought leader and get that content shared out to other people, I think it's a great idea to post it on other mediums.
Sorry, to continue on that question.
Yes.
Do you think that it's better to have these things like published on your website and then share them on LinkedIn? Because like we could put them on hidden pages if we think that would trend, better on LinkedIn or.
No, I think it's better to make them public on your website, but then share them on LinkedIn not as a post, but as what are those called?
An article share?
An article, whatever it's called, on LinkedIn, native to LinkedIn, but just put your original link that's on your website as the original source, and Google will add that canonical tag. So you're not hiding it on your website, you're just distributing it in 2 different places.
Okay.
Yes?
Are infographics still really a good piece of content?
It's not if you don't make it mobile friendly. So infographics have evolved quite a bit because when we use our phones, we think about, we're used to like infographics being that aspect ratio that we all know, which is like really fucking long and like 600 pixels wide, right? Like that's kind of that standard aspect ratio or like dimensions of an infographic. But when we condense that down to a phone, you guys all know what happens. You're like, okay, I've got to like zoom in on these infographics. So that's why you've seen infographics kind of decline in usage and engagement over time, because people have not adapted their infographics to work well on mobile. I think that there's a place for mobile-friendly infographics, as we haven't really evolved toward them yet. I think what is the best that I've seen is when people take the same infographic, they blow up the one fact, and then they create like a carousel of content that you can scroll through instead of trying to make a really long single graphic. Those tend to work well. So that's kind of what I'm talking about when I say infographic, not the same 600 pixel wide desktop first version that you may have in your brain. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's a responsive website, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and you can create, like we have a facts page on children's.com that, I mean, it gets enough traffic that it was worth us creating a responsive infographic. Not every piece of content is worth a responsive infographic. Sometimes it's better just create it mobile first. In fact, okay, how many of you guys have your website gets 50%, more than 50% web traffic from mobile? How many of you don't know? Okay, so some of you. For those of you who get more than 50%, or actually just the whole room, how many of you guys have looked just at your blog to see what percentage comes from mobile? So some of you have looked, but not nearly the number of hands that's more than 50% mobile. So children's.com, 65% mobile on a standard page, close to 90% mobile on our blog. So that's something to think about too. Is like you may have a responsive website, but where this content lives may basically be only mobile. So a mobile first approach might be the most appropriate rather than a hybrid approach where you're trying to make it work on every device. Other questions? We're running out of time. No, not even close. Love it. Other questions?
Are you seeing that
Yes.
PDFs are going away or just being used in conjunction with that long form content being embedded within the web page because Google content is anything or tagging it up through?
Yeah, we're moving completely away from PDFs, primarily from an accessibility perspective. Well, there's 2 reasons. How many of you guys love opening a PDF on your phone? Right. So again, that skew toward mobile makes PDFs less desirable. And then from an accessibility perspective, it's really difficult to make an accessible PDF that people that are visually impaired can actually engage with. So we're moving completely away from them. We're trying to abandon all PDFs for that reason. The one sort of like exception to that would be if you have the page that has all the content from the PDF on it, but you want somebody to be able to print it. It's a lot easier to print a PDF than it is to print a HTML page, even if you do have like a print CSS. Sometimes this doesn't look that great. So that is our one exception. Sometimes we have like a printable PDF there, but we're always trying to make sure that that content is there on the page. So that's and also like PDFs kind of suck as a result, right? Like, okay, great. Yes, Google does index a PDF. Hey, Will. But when Google index is that PDF, even if it does rank, which it's unlikely to, and somebody clicks through to it, okay, great, they're there, but then there's like no navigation, right? There's none of your other content. There's sort of like it's sort of disorienting to land on a PDF versus landing on a page that has all that same content from the PDF and being able to print that PDF. So we're moving away from it as much as possible. Other questions? Yes?
When you talk about moving away from PDFs, how does that kind of work with gating content? If that's a big piece of strategy for...
You can still gate an HTML page.
Can you... Okay.
Yeah, just make it no follow, no index. Have it behind a login portal. It's a little harder, a little more technical, but it can be done. Yeah. Yes?
I agree with you about PDFs. When I hate them, and I love it when someone sends it to me to have it be a download in an email.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, oh, that's a great idea, not.
Yeah, why didn't they just email you the content?
Yeah, but what would you recommend we do instead of the PDF? Because just create a full page about it?
I would create an HTML page. I would create an interactive experience that mimics a PDF, but is mobile responsive and accessible, and maybe even translated into Spanish and other, you know what I mean? Like, just think about the experience, the rich experience that an HTML page provides, like all the dynamics that can happen on an HTML page, and then think about how all of that is completely lacking in a PDF, and it becomes pretty obvious which one is the right choice, especially for those of us who need to market in multiple languages, work in highly regulated fields where we need to make sure that we're compliant. It's really difficult to be compliant in a PDF. Other questions? I think the rule is to wait like 17 seconds. Okay, thank you guys so much.